All right, Guru Nation, welcome back to another episode of Random Musings from the Clinical Trials Guru. This is also for the podcast, okay, because it's a long form. So the long form, the long form videos that make sense to go on the podcast, go on the podcast. The short ones, obviously, go on YouTube because people on podcast want like at least 15 minutes, if not longer. When they're driving, working out, taking a shower, walking the dog, whatever it is you're doing. Okay. I got a question that I'm going to go through. It's actually a lot of questions from the same person. And I'm going to go through some of this stuff and give you my best opinion on this, my best advice. Okay. I always tell clients, I always tell potential clients or potential students of my academies, look, I'm giving you the advice. Like I put myself in your shoes. I'm giving you the advice. I've told students on the phone before, potential students, that they don't need my academy. Literally told people, don't give me money. You don't need me. Most of the times it's beneficial. So the advice is a little more detailed, like CRA Academy versus CRC Academy, etc. Today I got a question from somebody looking or somebody that's working for a CRO. I think it's a CRO. So the client is pushing to accelerate study startup on a project. The study is very important to them and they want to complete it before the competitors. Okay, so this sounds like a mock interview question or one of those scenarios they give you in an interview. So maybe this person doesn't have a job yet. Okay, so let me read it again. The client is pushing to accelerate the startup activities on a project. The study is very important to them and they want to complete it before the competitors. There are penalties associated with not meeting SIV timelines, so the pressure on the team is very high. What actions could be proposed? How could you motivate the team to deliver on time? Boosting recruitment, scenario based, how would you analyze the situation? What kind of plan could be presented to the clients? Um, Database lock, what actions would you put into place to ensure a timely database lock and project closure? So this is, I'm assuming the client is pushing to accelerate study startup on a project. I'm assuming it's a big sponsor. Here's the scenario that I think, because there's not enough detail here for me to get context. I mean, this could be a site for all I know, although I doubt it. I doubt it's a site because sites rarely ask these kind of interview questions. So I think this is a CRO, and I think this is the situation. Big sponsors, when they have important trials and big trials, they usually do different protocols that are similar. So they just change a few things in the study. So they run them concurrently with one another. And they oftentimes hire two different CROs to manage each of those projects, right? And then they compare. So the purpose of the study is not to compare, or the purpose of the two studies is not to compare necessarily the CROs, which one perform better. I mean, that's one of the objectives, but the main objective is to see, okay, what was the impact on enrollment, on randomization, maybe even on safety and efficacy on the data we collected by tweaking a few things from each protocol. Otherwise, the protocols are very similar, same indication, not the same sites. Okay, not the same sites. So they are competing the CROs against each other, so that if they do another protocol, they know which CRO performed better, right? So this is what I'm just guessing because I've seen this scenario before. I've talked to sponsors about this. They do this. The big ones do this, and the CROs are aware of this. And sometimes they're told outright, we're giving you this project, we're giving another CRO this project. They're almost the same study. We just changed a few things, and so you guys do this, they're going to do that, and we're going to see what's going to happen. So the client is pushing to accelerate the startup activities on a project. The study is very important to them and they want to complete it before the competitors. There are penalties associated with not meeting SIV timelines, so the pressure on the team is very high. The penalties might be, the sponsor might say, hey, CRO that couldn't get the sites through startup and to SIV, Thank you very much. We're going to put the other CRO on this study now for SIV. So now the CRO has both. So the penalties can be very high. What actions could be proposed? How could you motivate the team to deliver on time? This is all about getting the study startup specialists engaged. You have to, when you're in startup mode, you have to follow up with the sites on their startup activity. You can't get your foot off the gas and just hope that the site does it when they want to do it when it's this important. Okay, when you have deadlines to meet. So in this case, it's all comes down to the study startup team. You've got to have metrics in place. Okay, how often did you call the site? When did you email? I mean, if this were me, if this were my CRO competing with another, if this was DSCS CRO competing with another, I personally would be on the phone with the sites that are not giving me the study startup documents on time, that are not delivering the study startup regulatory startup documents on time. I'd be calling them every single day. I would start at 9 a.m. and I would end at 5, and I would call every 15 minutes until I get a response. Okay, that's how I would do it. I don't know if you're going to go that extreme, but they want to see what your thought process is like, what actions you can propose. I think hourly phone calls. I think hourly emails. I think calling multiple people from the team to create the sense of urgency. I would say maybe even letting the sites know, hey, if you can't get your study documents in time, we're going to activate our backup sites. That's another strategy you can do. Bring on backup sites, have them activated, tell them that they're backup sites, but if they get their regulatory documents up and running, and another site can't, that you're going to replace them. Okay, so now the sites don't really want to lose studies, at least for the most part. Most sites don't want to lose a study. So if they see that it's that urgent, they're going to get it done. So those are some actions I would propose if I were in the interview. How could you motivate the team to deliver on time? Let my colleagues know, hey, did you call this person? Let's have a log in place. Let's have a log of a call log and an email log, and let's actually track every single regulatory document, the status of it. So the 1572 for site A, is it done? 1572 for site B, is it done? Financial disclosures for site A, is it done? IRB approval for site A, for site B. I would just track all these things. Okay, and I would then let the sites that are lagging know, hey, we're tracking literally every document you have. This is where you measure up compared to the other sites in startup phase. I would even call the PI if it were that serious. Like, hey, PI, do you know that you're at the bottom of all the other sites we're measuring as far as the regulatory documents that your site has given us? And I don't want this to happen, but we do have backup sites that we can activate. That should be enough to motivate the site and enough to motivate your team. The thing is, I rarely see this kind of urgency from startup specialists because you can't use this strategy all the time. You know, some sites might call your bluff and say, okay, well, then activate those other sites. We don't want it. Usually, like a university might do that because universities are, really busy. So those tend to be the slowest ones to get these things going, is the universities. Those are tough. But for the other sites, it might work. For the smaller sites, it might work. Boosting recruitment, scenario-based presentation. So how would you analyze the situation? What kind of plan could be presented to clients for the boosting of the recruitment? So booster visits are done when sites are not recruiting patients like they said they would. Then the CRO does what's called a booster visit, where they're supposed to go, or at least nowadays during COVID, maybe do a Zoom where they're talking to the PI and the coordinator and the other staff about, hey, why are you not recruiting? Is there anything we can do to help? Are you guys exhausting all your methods of recruiting? What about your database? What about community outreach? Here's what some other sites are doing well. This is where you can kind of share best practices. What are the sites who are recruiting well? Maybe find out from your colleagues, maybe you're not dealing with a site that is enrolling well, but your colleague is across the, one of your colleagues is dealing with that site. So you can talk to your colleague and say, hey, what's that site over there? How are they recruiting so well? Can you find out for me? Because my site's not doing well and I want to maybe share some best practices. That's one of the methods you can do it. Another one is put pressure on them as well. Hey, look, we have backup sites. They're ready to go. We hate to pull the study for me, but if you can't, we're losing money on you, on keeping you active. So please, if you can, make sure you screen and and try to enroll. Oftentimes the sites just have exhausted their database, and no matter what you do, they're just not going to screen because they don't have the patience. And so that's unavoidable, and this is why clinical research recruitment is the most difficult thing in this entire industry, for sites, sponsors, CROs, everybody. How would you work with the clinical team to implement this plan? What kind of plan could be presented to clients? You can always work with a central recruiter. So I'm not going to mention names, but there are vendors out there that specialize in study recruitment. I would make sure and find out what their track record is as far as the particular therapeutic indication that you're dealing with. There are digital recruiting vendors. There are traditional TV, radio, print vendors. You got to see what kind of budget you have. You can always propose that to your client. The client is the sponsor. Recruitment vendors, and most CROs have a Rolodex of vendors they've used in the past. So you can go look at previous studies and see, okay, did we have a central campaign? What did we do? This and that. How would you work with the clinical team to implement this plan? That's very simple. You have to communicate, okay, and make sure everybody on your team is on the same page. So when you do booster visits, the CRA needs to be on the same page with what I'm guessing you're like the in-house CRA, or the project assistant maybe. You guys all have to be on the same page, communicating the same message, consistent message to the site. In other words, they can't be hearing tough talk from you, and then when your CRA comes out, they're hearing a different story. You guys need to be on the same page. When it comes to a database lock, okay, what actions would you put in place to ensure a timely database lock and project closure? It's more of the same. And I'm guessing this is an interview for an in-house CRA, because the in-house CRAs are the ones turning up the heat on the sites. The CRAs do it too for their visits, for their monitoring visits, but the in-house CRAs are the ones doing it constantly following up. A lot of our CRA Academy and CRC Academy students get hired in this exact role. So I know it well. So for database lock, it's literally the same thing as for startup. Okay, it's just instead of asking for startup regulatory documents, you're asking them to close out queries. And it's a little more difficult because you can't threaten the sites to lose the study as you can at startup, because you're invested in the site already. They have data that they have submitted. So you can't just take them off the study at this point. Okay. You can probably threaten them with closing their enrollment. So say, hey, we're going to shut down enrollment until you are, and that's shutting down their way to make money, right? So we're going to pause your enrollment until you get database lock cleaned up. We need queries cleaned up. We're literally going to turn off your IWRS until this database lock is done. That strategy is done often as well. Sometimes it's just done across the board. Usually it's done for the sites that are not complying. If it's database lock prior to closeout, you can always let them know, hey, you're 10% of the budget, because usually and it depends on how the site negotiated their budget, but usually the sponsor or the CRO has 10% holdback. They call it a holdback until closeout visit, to make sure that sites are doing the database lock stuff, that they are closing out queries even after there's no more patients in the study, because they can get their 10% holdback, right? So you do have some weapons in place. Database lock is always stressful. You're going to require constant communication with the sites, phone calls, emails, as often as you can. Track them. Make sure that your colleagues are doing the same. Make sure the messaging is consistent. That's at least my strategy. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Let me know what strategies you've done. Maybe you've done this role. All right. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this. Take care.